What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to the View from the Clipper podcast. I'm your host, James Warner, as always, joined by my co-host, Josh Sexton. Josh, how are you doing this evening?
Doing well, James. It's a good day to be a Clippers fan in England. I think both of those things can be exclusively linked today. Me and you are recording this quite late on the Monday because we've both just made the decision to watch Portugal versus Spain. Our schedules didn't quite align last week, did they? In reacting to the
No.
Kawhi news, so apologies to anyone who was looking out for our reaction to that. We're going to make sure that is covered in today's show. But there's been a lot of World Cup football action for me and James to dive into. England won in the early hours of this morning. So as I say, we're both riding the high of that, both riding the high of the Clippers, making some moves. Also, it seems. How are you feeling about it all, James?
I feel great. I'm deep into World Cup fever at the moment. Obviously, like you mentioned last week, wasn't able to sit down and record. I've been obviously following England. I was up early this morning, watching England Mexico. So yeah, that has just taken up all my time. But I've had a lot of time still remaining to be following all the moves that's going on. Obviously, free agency is now open in the NBA. There are trades flying around. There are big moves being made. Obviously, we're a couple of weeks removed from the NBA draft, where obviously the Clippers picked up Keaton Wagler, among a few other names in the second round, which we might get to touch on today. But thought we'd probably start on the big news that we haven't spoken about. I think we've both commented on it on X, and it's that Kawhi Leonard is no longer an LA Clipper. Kawhi traded back to Toronto, where obviously was playing before he decided to leave in free agency and sign with the Clippers back in July 2019. So 7 years with the Clippers come to an end. Clippers decided it was time to call it with Kawhi. I think there was a lot of noise, and we can probably talk about this in a bit more detail in a second, but to me, it sounded like there were noise on both sides. Like the Clippers were maybe moving Kawhi or maybe interested, but also weren't really interested in like fielding him. They just wanted to open up a bidding war. And I think when it came down to it, the package that came from Toronto was probably the right move to make for the front office. It's probably the best they were going to get. Obviously, Kawhi extension eligible. Clippers weren't going to extend him. I think they recognised that, and they weren't willing to pay him what he wanted. He's obviously going to get the full extension with Toronto. But what did the Clippers get? The Clippers got Brandon Ingram. They got Grady Dick, unprotected first round picks in 2031 and 2033, which was information that was held back to start with. So the draft picks were not, it was not classified in terms of what was protected, what wasn't, what was a pick swap. So it came out that 2031 and 2033 will be unprotected, which I find really interesting. We can touch on that in a bit more detail. And also 2027 first round pick swap, which is also interesting to a degree, and two second round picks. Josh, I want to get your opinion to start with. How do you feel that Kawhi Leonard is no longer an LA Clipper, and what do you make of the trade?
It's strange, isn't it, James? Because I think this is kind of like the cross section that we all have with sort of like sports and life, I guess. Like even to the point, at the top of the show there, we're literally referencing like recording this at 10:25 on a Monday evening, having both of us, stayed up till the early hours or got up early to watch England last night. Like these are the things that sports ultimately make us do, and for our love of basketball, for our love of the LA Clippers. We've decided to start this podcast. You, of course, have got a Clippers UK page that you run. You've set up a community which brings people in the UK together to support the Clippers. And really, we've both done that at sort of our like peaks of this, if you want to say that, or we've put the most into that and started this podcast all during this 2-1-3 era. So really, like me in like a content creator space, I guess, or like turning my Clippers fandom into content in a bit more of a sort of regular way. That has all run through the 2-1-3 era of the Clippers, and to think that we've sat on podcasts here and maybe defended Kawhi around his injury problems in the past. We've sat on this podcast and both defended and then gone against Paul George for a variety of things down the years, and now he somehow finds himself in Boston, which we can maybe talk about in reference to this trade and the package the Clippers managed to get back
Yes,
for
yeah.
Kawhi Leonard. And then of course course, James Harden, kind of, similar to both really, in that we've, defended him, we've maybe criticised him at times when he was in a Clippers jersey, but also remembered him really fondly. And for Kawhi is going to sort of remembered like is almost Clippers legacy, I guess, if you wanted to get straight into that, is going to be remembered as like quite a complicated mix of things because I'm sort of like reminded of how New York has responded to Julius Randle in recent times, like since the New York Knicks won the championship, how much love Julius Randle has been shown. Bear in mind, Julius Randle didn't win a championship with New York. He now finds himself in Brooklyn, just across the city from New York as well, or across the city from the Knicks over there with the Brooklyn Nets. But what New York fans say is that, well, yeah, but the Knicks were terrible when Julius Randle joined the franchise. Julius Randle made the Knicks relevant again, and he was almost kind of like the first domino that fell in a series of really big moves, and he was ultimately a domino that fell in a move away that brought them Karl Anthony Towns, and then Karl Anthony Towns just had like he honestly was in with the claim of being Finals MVP alongside OG Anunoby and obviously Jalen Brunson, who eventually won it for my tastes of what I saw from the Knicks.
Yeah.
So I think that's why people sort of take the perspective of like, oh yeah, well thank Julius Randle because we can see what he contributed to this era of New York Knicks basketball. And I've realised I feel very similar about Kawhi Leonard, where yes, there are going to be so many things in the same way I think Knicks fans will feel this about Julius Randle that frustrated me with Kawhi. The injuries frustrated me, the inability to ever make it through a playoffs completely healthy. The constant like feeling like you're on the cusp of something and Kawhi being great and then his body ultimately just failing him, or some sort of mad series of events happening, the aspiration situation that we still find ourselves stuck in at the moment, that just kind of like takes away from how good the basketball is with Kawhi and creates this like little sideshow off here. All those things are seriously frustrating, but I don't know about you, James, like the emotions that came after the trade, the things that came flooding back to your sort of memory after the trade. I remember that video of Pat Beverly and Lou Williams, who of course ended up being casualties of the 2-1-3 era really, but were there at the very start of it from that underdog Clippers team that we loved. And they were in the casino in Vegas. I presume they were in some casino somewhere.
Probably for Summer League, right?
Yeah, I think it probably was, yeah. And they were both going to the camera being like, the price just went up, the price just went up, because the Clippers had finally really, it's certainly in our lifetimes, listen, they managed to get their way in on the Chris Paul trade after that was vetoed by the league. They, of course, drafted Blake Griffin. I'm pretty sure they drafted DeAndre Jordan as well. It's a little bit before my Clippers fandom started, but I think I'm right in saying they drafted both DeAndre Jordan and Blake Griffin. So that was more like homegrown talent for the Clippers, really. It was great talent, ultimately, that came to no real great team success, no conference finals, no finals appearances, no championships, as I'm sure Clippers fans won't be happy with me for reminding them of. But the Kawhi Leonard era, bringing in Paul George, for whatever people want to say about that trade now, I'm sort of not really here to hear it. Like, that made the Clippers relevant. It put the Clippers on the map. It led to this all like crazy but very winning era of Clippers basketball, where I think we've only missed the playoffs once. And is that just this season as well? Do we lose in the play-in once before? I think like the Clippers have always been in with a shout of the postseason because of this basketball player, and ultimately because of Paul George, and ultimately because of James Harden sort of brought him onto the end of this era too. So as I say, like a real mix of emotions, really. I'm sure I've gone through the whole range of them, even just in speaking about this. But then, as I referenced in passing before, and I don't know if you want to touch on the legacy stuff, James, before you touch on this, but when you see the package that the Celtics ended up shipping Jaylen Brown out for, I can't help but feel like the Clippers have done so well pivoting away from this 2-1-3 era, whether it be what they got for James Harden, whether it be what they got for Ivica Zubac, or now whether it be what they got for Kawhi Leonard.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I want to touch a bit on the legacy of Kawhi because, and your point that you made at the start was completely true. I was in university when Kawhi was acquired by the Clippers. They decided to make Clippers UK. Like, it was sort of the reason that brought me into setting up a Clippers UK community, getting to know you, going to create this podcast. Like, that was all due to the Kawhi move. Obviously, I'd been a Clippers fan for many years, but this was that big swing that sort of waited for the franchise to take. And obviously, Kawhi coming off that championship year of Toronto, it felt like something special was brewing for the Clippers. And yeah, I mean, looking back, it's been a great 7 years following the Clippers. Has been ups and downs. the thing that's probably dominated the most, as you said, injuries, health, just sort of disappointment after disappointment. I don't think that's any slight on Kawhi. I think we knew what we were getting into, and a few injuries along the way made it worse. I'd say probably the ACL in 2021 was the big thing. I think the first 2 years that Kawhi had with the Clippers was his and our best chance to win a championship. I think many would argue that bubble season, the Clippers were deep. They should not have blown a 3-1 lead to the Nuggets. And maybe if it wasn't in a bubble, if we didn't have COVID, so many ifs, right? Maybe the Clippers would have at least got to the NBA Finals. I thought the Clippers were better than the Lakers that season, who obviously ended up winning the NBA championship. And obviously that was heartbreaking, but June 2021, probably even a stronger claim, maybe you could argue, just given the performance in that playoff series. And Kawhi just felt like he was just going to drag us to it. But that ACL injury, just will never forget it. Joe Ingles, the Utah Jazz, and it ended up being Paul George who dragged us to our first Western Conference Finals. And since then, it just feels like we've just been trying to get Kawhi to play basketball, and there have been moments where it seemed like maybe he's back and then he'd have a bad playoff series. And then last season, plays 65 games, averages a career high points, finished seventh in MVP voting as well. But disappointing sort of bow out of the play-in tournament to a Warriors team that really weren't, that the Clippers had beat many times in that season, and I think Kawhi in that game had a disappointing performance. So there's no doubt the Clippers obviously losing fantastic talent. I think if you're thinking about talent alone, I would put him up there. Maybe I don't want to go early on it, but I would say he's probably one of the most, if not the most talented Clippers player of all time. Just his injuries held him back. He could have taken it so much further, but just wasn't able to be on the court enough to show it, which is disappointing in the end. But yeah, if I think you look back at last season, I think the Clippers clearly probably quite chuffed that they can kind of feel like they're selling high on Kawhi, even though given his age, given his health, he's coming towards the end of his career due an extension, like I mentioned. Um, to be able to get the kind of package they got from the Raptors is, I think, really significant, really important for the Clippers. I've seen a lot of people arguing that maybe the Clippers should have kept him around for a year. I wonder, and the aspiration stuff definitely plays into this, but I
Yeah.
wonder if there was maybe some conversations had about Kawhi not actually on his side being willing to stick around in LA. Now we heard murmurs of that this season, didn't we? I think in a few interviews. I think there was one in particular. I can't remember the exact quote, but he essentially mentioned along the lines of just recognizing that the Clippers are not a contender, and Kawhi clearly wants to maximize the end of his career. I felt, given he obviously was desperate to come to LA, desperate to play at home, that he would maybe want to retire in that setting, but clearly not. I mean, he gave up the Raptors to come to the Clippers, and here he is. I think he made it known as well that the Raptors were one of the only teams that he would sign that extension with. So maybe it's just that familiarity with the city, the connection with the fans, and that's obviously maybe put the Clippers in maybe a bit of a difficult position, because I think there was definitely a lot of other teams. Maybe we could argue maybe the Clippers could have even got more for Kawhi, because if that wasn't public knowledge, and maybe Kawhi was willing to sign with, trying to think of some of the teams that were interested. Dallas, I think, Detroit were interested, so maybe we could have got into a bit of a bidding war, but it just seemed like it could be the Raptors or nobody. And yeah, like I mentioned, managed to acquire Brandon Ingram, Grady Dick, and a slew of quite, I think, impressive draft capital, particularly the unprotected first round picks in 2031, 2033, where I'm assuming that Kawhi is not going to be in the NBA. I'd be very shocked if he's still playing at that point. And where are the Toronto Raptors at that point? So those are really important picks for them to be unprotected. It brings the Clippers timeline back, more forward, and gives them more opportunities, gives them more assets for someone that could easily just play one season and walk. Like I definitely see the argument for Kawhi staying a year just to keep the Clippers competitive, because obviously there's no incentive for them to tank this year. But if you're giving up one pick this season for playing Kawhi, or you have the option to get two future first rounders, like that is just a net positive, isn't it? And it is not just that, like 2027 first round swap, although, arguably it could only be a few spots in the draft. The Clippers are due the Thunder's pick next year, let's be honest. So that's probably going to be, what, 29 or 30. So to get the Raptors pick in that case, probably talking maybe mid 20s. So they're moving up 5 spots in the draft next year as well, which is important. And it's not a very impressive draft, but so I've heard. So yeah, I think let's talk about the package, Josh. I've touched on it a bit there. I'm pleased with it. I think it sounds like you are as well. Give me your thoughts on what the Clippers are getting back in this deal.
Yeah, I mean, one of the only criticism I think people could have about it at the time when it first came out, as you said, there was a bit of like almost a lack of clarity at first of what the Clippers were definitely getting. It was I think when Shams broke it, it was billed as 2 first round picks, a pick swap and 2 second rounders. But people couldn't quite figure out. I think there was maybe a bit of like smoke and mirrors about when those picks would be and when the swap would be, and maybe some confusion around that. And I remember certainly seeing like a few like Clippers fans at the time being like, "Oh, like if the Clippers are only getting picks that are in the next couple of years, as in on the Kawhi Leonard timeline with Toronto, then this is not worthwhile because the draft class is not deep to the point where the Clippers could." Get a sort of winning teams pick in Toronto as we're assuming they will be, and still be able to draft well, lower down the board. But as you say, it kind of turned out that one of those first round picks was in 2033, which as you again said correctly, I don't see any way in which Kawhi Leonard is in the league in that time. I'd even be pretty surprised, really, if he was in the league in 2031, given his, health issues
Yeah.
and things down the years. It sounds, to all intents and purposes, like this extension between him and Toronto is being worked on, like literally as we speak. There's been, a bit of sort of
Yeah.
not breaking news as such, but a bit of news on that today. I expect that will probably come in at 3 years, and that Kawhi will say that is my last deal in the NBA, and I'll retire in Toronto. And if that's the case, it means that 2031 pick basically comes straight in the first non-Kawhi year that Toronto has. So incredible for the Clippers to be able to get that in this deal. The first round pick swap next season, much of a muchness, but pick swaps kind of are, and I think they've like enveloped it into another pick swap the Clippers are already in, aren't they? So I don't even know how much they sort of move up in that too. It's all a bit of confusion around the swaps, isn't it?
Yeah, they had a swap with the Thunder for next season. I think it's the very last swap or pick sort of dealings with the Thunder.
Yeah,
But I think the Nuggets have been roped into that as well. So
right.
it's the Nuggets, Thunder, Raptors, and Clippers, and I think the Clippers get the second best out of that, and I think that's not including the Nuggets. I think the Nuggets involvement is where it gets confusing. So I think it's
Us.
actually the Clippers get the second best of Thunder, their own, and Raptors. Which,
Yeah,
if you think about it on paper right now, it's probably going to be the Raptors, unless Kawhi gets an ACL and God knows what else happens to their team. I think on paper we're essentially getting their pick next season.
the pick swaps have jumped the shark, haven't they? Like I know I moaned a bit on the post Ivica Zubac's trade show that we did around that time about like the pick protections just becoming wild, but to the point where like you've got 4 team pick swaps going on. Like you've just lost me, I'm afraid. Like the pick protections obviously ultimately worked in the Clippers' favour. So now, of course, I'm a massive fan of pick protections, especially 2-way ones, because I like where the Clippers tend to land in them. Off my first experience of being in the midst of one of those, but I really like the return the Clippers got for Kawhi. Like, there's no complaints from me about it. Listen, this is for all the greatness that Kawhi brings, and he brought so much greatness on the court in the regular season last season. He still like, and I don't mean to do this to like sort of piss on his grave, to for want of a better phrase, after he's gone now, but he still is the guy who got swallowed up by Draymond Green in the play-in last season. I'm hearing a lot of like mainstream NBA pundits in the last few days, guys like Bill Simmons and Zach Lowe and stuff, like talking about how Kawhi's just never there when the playoffs are there, and even when he has been, he's either been like so hurt that when he's dunking, he's like taking age and swinging on the basket so he can like do a soft landing, or he's getting swallowed up by Draymond Green in playoff games. Like, this is just not ultimately the same Kawhi Leonard anymore. The Clippers have, as I mentioned before, an aspirations sideshow that they're dealing with. So like, if you'd have said to me we'd have got this haul for Kawhi with all the kind of question marks that come around Kawhi, I would have been absolutely made up with it. And this is the package that they've come away with now. I don't know what to think of the players' side of it, really. We're going to come on to talk about the other moves the Clippers are making. As the Clippers make more moves, I start to think that the headline one of this in Brandon Ingram makes more sense.
Yeah,
The Grady Dick one feels to me just like a, he's a young player the Raptors thrown into this trade. As a young player, the Raptors thrown into this trade.
salary
Potentially high
player,
up,
right?
yeah, potentially
Yeah.
high upside, but like it doesn't seem like Toronto fans are, very fond of him or his game from the past few years. So that's just like a suck it and see with the Clippers. Really, the Clippers have been good to some degree at rehabilitating players' reputations and on-court things in the last few years. Whether I've necessarily liked that strategy or not, Grady Dick doesn't fall into the same category as guys like Josh Primo or Kevin Porter Jr. for their off-court things. So I'm all for the Clippers taking a chance on a guy with high upside, all for them having Brandon Ingram come in and kind of match the Darius Garland timeline. And then, as I say, the moves that, one of them that's already happened and one of them that could subsequently happen feel just like they kind of marry into that timeline. And listen, they might not make the Clippers contenders. I just think we might need to reframe our mindset. Like, we don't have a guy in Kawhi Leonard who is like one of the top players in the NBA on our roster anymore. Like, we're going to at best be a good young fun team until maybe Keaton Wagler reaches the heights that you hope a fifth pick in the draft can reach, or you just find other ways to pick up greatness along the way. But if we're a fun young team in the meantime, if we're not in that relegation zone, so we're in the kind of in between grey area of like, will they be at the back end of the playoffs and could they potentially upset someone in the first round, or will they be in the lottery but outside the relegation so we can get more high ranking picks?
Yeah.
I'm kind of all for that at this stage.
I'm for it as well, and I can see what the Clippers are trying to do with these moves. Like, and like I said, we'll get onto some of the other moves, but it just feels like we're entering into a new window where, like I said, let's take some low risk, high reward moves, some guys with high upside that, financially it's not going to cost us. I mean, I think you just have to look at the bigger picture of the Clippers. Like, as soon as you trade Kawhi, you're basically admitting you're probably not going to be a playoff team. You might be a playing team. I mean, the Clippers were a playing team last year with Kawhi, so you're lucky probably if you're a playing team. So that's the story around the team for the next. I mean, this is probably for the next 2 to 3 years, right? So we're almost entering like a new window of not being a serious team, not being a playoff team. So how do you get this team back to be competitive as quickly as possible? And I think it is really about signing these kind of players like Brandon Ingram, like having a Darius Garland and a few of the other players we'll mention in a second on these short windows contracts. So Brandon Ingram comes in. I think he's got 2 years left. He's got a deal this year, 40 million. He's got a player option next season, and then he's a free agent. So Clippers can see what they get with Brandon Ingram this year. It's obviously we probably know what we're going to get. It was obviously two-time All-Star last season, but probably not the guy who's going to really get you competing on the top end of the table. I think the same could probably be argued for Darius Garland. I feel like maybe Darius Garland, obviously a little younger than Brandon Ingram, um, but I think there are similar question marks around, is that a franchise guy who you can build around? I'd probably have more question marks about Brandon Ingram, like I've said, but I do feel like Clippers have now got two guys who are, let's not get it wrong, both very, very talented and can keep the team competitive for now, but um, have contracts in situations where if it doesn't look good this year, or opportunities come up where a big star wants to move from a team, or someone in the free agency next year or the year after, or Keaton Wagler all of a sudden is really putting up trees and looking good. The Clippers can move these guys around. They're not bad contracts, because the Clippers are not competing in the next 2 years. So they'll continuously have these windows of opportunity where they can move off. I mean, next year, Brandon Ingram's contract is probably quite interesting to many teams who are probably tanking, right? Like, that is a salary that they can just get off their books and just keep around. So I'm not fussed about getting Brandon. Brandon Ingram back, and like you mentioned with Grady Dick, that is probably like again like a low risk, high reward. They may already have their mind made up about him. I think my only issue with like giving Grady Dick an opportunity is I kind of want to see more from Cam Christie. That's just my own bias. I think they profile as very similar players, like slashing wings. You can kind of shoot, but of not like Cam Christie, obviously not maybe as much as Grady Dick has not proven himself yet. But two guys are probably going to be like fighting for their next big opportunity, and I do think they are very similar. So let's see what happens with Grady Dick. But I think overall, the Clippers get back probably more than they could get back from any other deal, surprisingly. So yeah, it's definitely crazy to say that Kawhi is no longer a Clipper, but like I said, the Clippers are entering a brand new era, and I think it's pretty exciting. If you look at the roster now, sort of before any of the other moves the Clippers have made, it's definitely an interesting group. I don't know where this group currently sits in the West, and that makes me a little nervous, particularly obviously because the Clippers obviously don't control their short-term draft future. Whereas it would be great if the Clippers had their pick this year, had their pick the season after, and could go down the tanking route. But we know the team don't really want to do that anyway. So I feel like trying to build out this team, like we've mentioned, with guys who are sort of up and coming with potential, but also players who sort of fit the same age bracket as like a Darius Garland, Brandon Ingram, who might retain some value, is extremely important. And the Clippers are continuing to do that. And it was just today that the Clippers have signed Roy Hachimura to a 2-year, $28 million deal. And it's a team option in the second season, which I think makes it, for me, a bit more palatable. I like Hachimura. Do I think he's a great fit on this current group of Clippers players? Bear in mind, I don't think this is like a finalized group yet. Like, there's probably gonna be more moves to be made. Um, I don't love the rebounding, but is he probably one of the best shooting forwards in the league that's available? Absolutely. And he had a fantastic end to the season with the Lakers. Um, so I'm a big fan of it. I'm happy with it. It fills a hole in the roster. Because I will just also mention John Collins did not get re-signed by the Clippers, moving to Detroit Pistons. So a bit of a double segment here. Josh, how do you feel about these moves at the power forward position?
Yeah, again, like I understand the concerns about like the rebounding, for example. I understand the concerns about the defense. I think anyone who's, sort of looking at that as in like, oh, it's a front court of him and Brook Lopez is like kind of missing the point of us re-signing Brook Lopez. Like we re-signed Brook Lopez because we saw this center class was, basically trash to all intents and purposes. I mean, the Lakers just put down what was it, like 130 odd million on Walker Kessler, who has like not
Yeah,
really proven anything in the league yet, and the Lakers have decided he's a center that's worth over 30 million. I think basically because Luka Doncic has once again gone out and demanded a center, and they've like pandered to that request, as they probably should do because he's their star, but they've done it by really overpaying, actually double overpaying by doing it with a sign and trade with picks. So that's the centre market the Clippers are also operating in alongside the Lakers. So they've basically took the way of thinking of like, listen, we don't love Brook Lopez's fit with this team. He's definitely not on the timeline of these guys going forward, but to just opt in for 9 million expiring next season, I would imagine Brook probably retires at the end of the season anyway. Whatever happens, throughout this season, the ideal scenario would be that Yannick Cohn-Niederhauser would come back to the
yeah,
team, show the kind of potential that he's already shown so far, and the Clippers can kind of harness that going forward between him and Isaiah Jackson. Because I think Isaiah Jackson is only like 24 years old or something as well, so
yeah.
he even kind of fits the timeline of these other guys on this roster. Like I don't know if I love Isaiah Jackson's game enough that I'd want him to be the backup center in theory behind Yannick Cohn-Niederhauser, but I'm prepared to see how that kind of unfolds over this season while we're still experimenting with the roster a little bit. So like I don't mind the Rui Hachimura fit, like sort of focusing on the drawbacks, because I think the drawbacks are kind of like, again, coming from a place where we're probably so used to like looking at the roster and being like, okay, like what do we need to be in contention here? We need to make sure like the rebound is really solid, the playmaking is really solid, the defense is really solid, and like we probably listen, obviously you build any roster with all those things in mind to an extent. Like I'm not trying to be like sound like I'm sort of puffing the PR thing here of being like, oh, the Clippers don't need any of those things. Of course, the Clippers need some of those things to be good, but I just think the Clippers have also got like weapons and things they can use in their armory here. One of the skills that Ty Lue has is he's a really good X's and O's guy. There's ways in which he can like put lineups out on the floor that maybe negate for rebounding weaknesses and Rui Hachimura's thing,
Yeah.
or negate for some of the things that maybe Brook Lopez lacks in this first half of the season until hopefully Yannick comes back and takes the starting center spot. I love the shooting from Rui. Like I guess I always still thought of him as like a mid-range guy, and I was probably initially a bit worried, which maybe sounds like I'm being hypocritical, but I always say this on this, like I'm bound to be hypocritical because ultimately I'm just a fan who wants this team to win, yes, but also like look good and play good and make me enjoy basketball while they're doing it. But I was looking at the fit alongside Brandon Ingram and being like, oh, like you've already got your mid-range shooter guy, like do you really just want to clog up the mid-range with another one? And then I flipped over to his stats from this season. I was like, oh, he shot 44% from three on nearly 4 attempts per game. That will absolutely do for me, because ultimately that comes in like similar numbers to what John Collins shot last season, and it looks like Rue is trending towards that point. Whereas I think John Collins took quite the leap really to be at that point from sort of season to season, especially from his last season with the Hawks. I think he was like a below 30% 3-point shooter in his last season with the Hawks, leapt up with the Jazz, and maybe that's just where he stays now because that's almost 2.5 seasons, I think 3 seasons of evidence of that, but. You feel much more solid in 3 seasons of Rui on the Lakers with over 41% shooting from three. So I like it. I like it as a pickup for the Clippers. Again, I like that it aligns with the timeline of Brandon Ingram. I like that they're kind of like similar timelines to Darius Garland as well, albeit he's like a little bit younger than both of them at 26 and those two at 28. But I think I'm right in thinking that Rui and Darius Garland came in the same draft class. It might be that him and Brandon Ingram did actually, and I've sort of conflated the two names there. But yeah, for me, an exciting pickup. I'm glad to see the Clippers even like doing this stuff because I know some guys in our like Clippers UK group chat were kind of losing their minds a little bit that the Clippers have gone really quiet in free agency while everyone else seemed to be making like the maddest moves they could possibly make. Which, by the way, if I'm a Boston Celtics fan right now, I'm not sure I wanted my team making as mad moves as they've made in the past few days. But the Clippers clearly like kept their powder dry, pulled this one out the bag, and then we've alluded to it a couple of times already, but there's maybe one other big move that they can make in this sort of free agency window, which could see this team being a really young, exciting, fun team. And yes, I know Rui Hachimura at 28 and Brandon Ingram at 28 are not like young per se, the guys who are coming into their peak, but Darius Garland is still the right side of his peak for me. I'll just say the name now rather than keeping teasing it. Peyton Watson is a guy who showed so much upside for Denver last season, especially when they had all their injuries, and he's like 23 years old. So if the Clippers can manage to pick him up alongside all these guys, that to me sounds like a really fun roster next season. And by the way, Peyton Watson is a very good defender, so maybe can negate some of those Rui weaknesses on that end. He even took a rebound in league last season, by the way, to 5 rebounds per game too.
That is an awesome segue. I'm gonna hold on it for 1 second just to make
Okay,
a
curve
final.
your run.
Yeah,
Not like
curving
I
around,
did.
just to make a final point of Roy Hachimura. Just think awesome fit the Clippers. I really like your point on just the Clippers don't need to be like the best rebounding team. They don't need to be a great rebounding team. This is not a playoff team, as we've said. It's just about remaining competitive for as long as possible, giving the younger guys an opportunity to flourish, and that he's going to be an excellent floor spacer. And I kind of I've seen comparisons with him and Marcus Morris, and I think he could be like the Marcus Morris 2.0 for Ty Lue next season. That could be it'd be pretty fun to see what he does with him, with potentially more opportunity than he was getting on the Lakers. So yeah, really really fun addition. Sad to see John Collins go over after just a short tenure. He was very fun to watch as a Clipper, and I think he'll be a success on the Pistons. And I think that's also like the kind of situation the Clippers are in, where they've got guys that really are in their prime and need and want to be in competitive situations. Obviously, Kawhi was probably like the number one. Then you had John Collins, which I don't think anyone was surprised that he didn't come back. I think you then enter another category, which would include Derek Jones Jr. And I think if the Clippers do go down the Peyton Watson group, I would not be surprised if they gave up on him because he is a guy who would probably be seen as quite valuable by the Clippers because I think he's like any contending team's dream, really. Like, I don't think he's in that role player tier of, when OKC picked up Hartenstein and Alex Caruso, like they just went and got like the best, but what I think was at the time was like the best role players you go and get to like compete for a title, which obviously helped them in the end to win the title. Like, I don't think Derek Jones Jr. is quite in that category, but defensively, like he's a point of attack defending. His athleticism, like we've seen him on the Clippers the last few years, he's been awesome, and he is in his prime. And I would not be surprised if the Clippers think if we can turn him into Peyton Watson, then maybe we do that. I don't know. I think there's a lot of murmurs around Peyton Watson, and I'm happy to get into this now around potential sign and trade with the Nuggets because I think the Nuggets don't seem too willing to pay him or what he wants, or at least get into like a bit of a bidding war. He's a restricted free agent as far as I'm aware. I think the rumors are that if he is to come to the Clippers, it's most likely via a sign and trade. So I'm trying to think of what the Clippers would give in that situation. Now I'm not seeing any sort of trade rumors flying around, but I think if Denver would definitely be interested in Derek Jones Jr. and probably that would be a trade that I might be interested in making. What are your thoughts, Josh?
Yeah, very intrigued by the whole thing. I mentioned some of the, fit things that I think he could bring to the Clippers before, but also with this idea of like the Clippers potentially being able to, sort of, I don't know, like include this or swallow this into a potential John Collins sign and trade. It seems like the John Collins deal has still not been sort of wrapped up. It was reported at first that it was just the Pistons reportedly agreeing to a 3-year deal, but then the details kind of came out after that it would be a sign and trade with the Clippers, and I presume what's been happening in the background since then is that they've been kind of figuring out what happens from there and how this goes. And sad to see John Collins go, of course, because he brought loads to the Clippers last season. I don't want to do that down in talking about sort of worst 3-point shooting, I guess, or like 3-point shooting that I felt like was above his ability, really. Like, he started off slow with the Clippers last season, of course, but then like really came to the party with it in the second half of the season. So yeah, I don't want to do down John Collins' contribution to the Clippers because I also really like what like the press pack members were saying about him as well, about how pleasant he was to deal with, how much they enjoyed him being around the locker room as like just a positive influence. Like, I really like having guys like that on my team. But if you'd said to me at the start of the off season, James, or at the end of last season, that there's a potential that you could see John Collins go out and the Clippers could get Peyton Watson in, basically while matching salaries, I'm the same as you. Like, I kind of hope it doesn't lead to a Derek Jones Jr. or even worse, me, like a Chris Dunn being shipped out. Like, I would be really sad to see either one of those guys go. But like I've said it on this podcast over and over again, I'm such a big Chris Dunn guy, and I feel like as we sort of start to build this like next era of the Clippers, players like Chris Dunn and Derek Jones Jr., I think to an extent, maybe not as much as Chris Dunn, but definitely still to an extent, can be a part of like building what that next culture is and teaching the new guys about what the Clippers culture has it's been like over the past few years when it's been at its best, and that sort of like really gritty underdog mentality, like embracing all of those things. So I like the idea that you bring a guy like Peyton Watson in, who is a really high level defender. For me, maybe doesn't guard like fours to maybe the level you'd want to. I don't know if that's even maybe harsh though. Really, like I imagine he guards fours better than you'd say like John Collins or Rui Hachimura does. So the idea that you bring him in to play alongside Rui Hachimura, well, that to me sounds like a lot of length for a start. Brandon Ingram is a guy who, yes, it's more like offensive length than defensive length, but also possesses a lot of length. It basically sounds to me like you kind of negate for one of the main concerns we've had about like a Darius Garland fit on the Clippers, is that, well, Darius Garland is like really diminutive in stature. You could see how offenses could really try and target him. But if the next three guys next to him, before Brook Lopez being a 7-footer or Yannick being 6'10", 6'11", I know Isaiah Jackson's only like 6'9", but again, I think his wingspan's like 7'2", 7'3". Isaiah Jackson, he's got like a crazy wingspan. So the idea that 3 or 4 guys next to Darius Garland or Keaton Wagler, when he sort of starts to get more point guard minutes, is guys that are all over like 6'6". I think Rui is he, and Peyton Watson's like 6'7". Brandon Ingram's like 6'8", 6'9".
Mhm.
That to me is like really, really appealing in terms of like the Clippers leaning more into being young, athletic, and having, that kind of length. I think one of the I don't know if it's like the Bulls GM or something, Bryson Graham, I want to say it is. He was like referencing in his introductory press conference for the Chicago Bulls about this idea of slap, which I think is size, length, athleticism, and maybe pace. I want to say. I feel like I always butcher that, like, and put a different P in every time, but a mix of all of those things is what it feels like to me. Yes, you maybe lose some of that in John Collins, but I think John Collins is always going to end up going somewhere and getting paid. The idea that you
Yep.
bring it in then in Peyton Watson, and we're not even thinking about Benedict Mather in there, whether he might not have the market and the Clippers find a way to just get him back on a qualifying offer. I don't know how realistic that is. I'm kind of keeping a half an eye on this Jalen Duren situation at the moment, not necessarily for the Clippers bringing him in, but more like the Pistons seem to be holding out because they don't want to pay him. I think it's like 100 million more he's technically allowed or qualified for on his Pistons contract, but no other team can pay him anywhere near that. So they're almost in this like impasse at the moment of like, well, we'll just wait to see if anyone offers you as much as they can, and then we'll match it because it'll be like so much less than we want to pay you, but we can pay you loads more. I
Yeah.
wonder if the Clippers will just kind of do the same with Bennett Mathen, where they're like, we don't necessarily want to pay you probably what you and your agent think like market rate is for you, so we're just going to wait and see what the market is, and if it's something we want to match, we'll match it. If there's
Yeah.
no market for you, we'll bring you back on like, I think it's like 8.5, 8.6 million or something like that. So then he becomes like, really key scoring piece off the bench behind all that size in the starting lineup. So it all just feels really exciting to me. You can all see how it slots in together. And yes, like, as much as I basically love guys who like come through the team and are positive influences on the team. I'll never really like tend to shit on guys when they go away, and like I hope that it comes across on this like how much I respect like Kawhi Leonard for example, for the contributions he made to the Clippers. The John Collins contribution is a one season contribution ultimately, but like I loved what John Collins brought to the Clippers, and if he can then go and get us a return of Peyton Watson sort of inhaled into the sign and trade, then like, God, I will love John Collins. Like, build him a statue. That will be like Mike
Yeah.
Muscala levels of Clippers legend for helping us get a Visa Zubac.
Yeah, because I think that I can't remember exactly who reported this, but it does appear that obviously the John Collins deal is not signed yet, and there is sort of indications based on the numbers that it could be uh, because it could be a sign and trade. And
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of avenues that the Clippers are just keeping open right now. There's a lot of deals that even the Clippers have made, and we'll touch on this in a second. Like Jordan Miller, for example. Jordan Miller is coming back to the Clippers on a new 3 year, $15 million deal, but that deal is not signed either. And again, gives the Clippers just that flexibility to just figure out these moves. So yeah, and that I think is the reason why I'm not so mad that the Clippers are taking their time with things, because they don't need to rush and grab free agents like other teams. They've not got someone to build around like every other team in the league, so they can just wait that out. I think they obviously appear to be definitely very keen on Peyton Watson, and I think they'll just see what else they can grab. And it's like we've already touched on many times, like it's just about the front office maximizing as much as they can get out of this off season. I think they've done a stellar job so far. And yeah, I mentioned it there. Jordan Miller obviously signing a new deal to come back to the Clippers, but Kobe Sanders as well, agreeing a 4 year, $11 million deal. Obviously was a second round pick, so for that to obviously be inked so quickly for him, obviously just goes to show like the hard work that he's put in, and he's going to be great next season. The Clippers got a lot of talent on this roster, and obviously they're going to need to find a way to probably find minutes for everyone. So I mean, and that's what makes this, I think, situation interesting with Benedict Mathurin, because I do think there's an argument out there that maybe you just let him walk because maybe the minutes are maybe more valuable elsewhere. I mean, we saw glimpses of what he can do, and um, whilst I think he has a future in the league, I just, yeah, maybe if he's the sacrifice to make to bring in like a Peyton Watson and maybe bring out some more like proven NBA talent, and then give the opportunity to Keaton Waddle. I think that's what's got to be key. The Clippers, I think, have really got to focus on seeing what they have in him, seeing what he is at the NBA level before they make any bigger moves. Because I just don't want to repeat of the situation which happened with SGA. Like, we all saw the talent there, but it wasn't. I think we didn't give it enough time to showcase it, and maybe he could obviously done with more minutes in that season as well. So yeah, then maybe that could be a decision. But what do you think about Jordan Miller and Kobe signing those deals? And obviously, it was inevitable they were coming back, but isn't it just like such brilliant news for them and obviously the hard work that they put in?
Yeah, sorry, I kind of forgot to mention them in like the culture discussion that I was talking about before. Really, like when you think about how guys like Chris Dunn and Derek Jones Jr. can kind of like teach new guys about the culture. Like Kobe Sanders and Jordan Miller are obviously still like embedding themselves into the Clippers and their culture and like trying to pick up minutes in this rotation now. I don't know about you, James. Like I feel so proud of Jordan Miller. Like especially now we're coming up to
Absolutely.
Summer League because we've done a couple of podcasts like around Summer League now and talked about how much of a killer he's been in Summer League. And I think maybe it might have even been last summer where I was like, now is the time though, because I think he was like coming into, being the age of 27, I think he is now. So like this was the time to like stop just being the Summer League killer and like find a way to make it translate to NBA games, like find out what your game looks like on an NBA floor. And like make no mistake, Jordan Miller absolutely did that this season. Yes, he's maybe not like the most sort of conventional wing player in the sense that he plays mostly at the three and he's a little bit undersized for the three in terms of like the size that you get for most threes these days. He doesn't also shoot the three ball particularly well. The shot is sort of a little bit slow from behind the arc, so it's not something that he tends to go to as often, but the mid-range shot is good. His ability to get to the basket is fantastic and draw free throws, like especially if you're not going to bring Benedict Mathurin back, who's great at getting to the basket and drawing contact. Like having a guy in Jordan Miller who can do that, I think is so useful to your team. And maybe that's where, as you say, the Clippers maybe do hold a bit more of a hard line on Benedict Mathurin because they're like, well, we know that we've got some of the skill set that we think is great, that you bring in a guy like Jordan Miller, and now we've already got him committed for a couple of years anyway. So pleased for him, and so pleased for us that we get to continue to watch him grow and play basketball. And again, as a guy who's about 27 years old, fits that timeline of, in
Yep.
between the Darius Garland, Brandon Ingram, Rui Hachimura, fit there. Kobe Sanders, I love as a move. Like, one of the reasons that I love sports in general, really, and I hope I'm not getting all like too gushing and romantic on this podcast. I think it's because England won this morning, and maybe my tired brain is just like leaning more into my emotional side.
Yeah.
But I love like underdog stories and guys who come from kind of out of nowhere and manage to like become heroes for people. And you might not think that Kobe Sanders necessarily a hero for anybody yet, but this guy was like a 50th pick in the draft last season. Like if me and James were sat here a year ago, I'm not sure either of us knew anything about Kobe Sanders and what he could, bring to the Clippers. And me and James have never claimed to be draft experts, of course not. But I don't remember seeing around at the time much sort of bluster or talk about Kobe Sanders and what he could bring to the Clippers. And yet,
Yep.
what he showed us this season in minimal minutes, really, like he found a way to really be a spark plug in not a very great sample size that he was offered up by the Clippers. So I'm pleased to see that he's been rewarded for like you bided your time last season. You gave us great minutes in with very little to work with last season. We think you are legit and we want you to be a part of this future, or at the very least this next few years with us, this next era of the Clippers. So really pleased that guys like him and Jordan Miller get to be almost part of this like bridge now where yes, you hope the Chris Dunns and Derek Jones Juniors stick around, but just as valuable will be the Kobe Sanders and the Jordan Millers who don't maybe have that like sway or standing in the locker room that older guys like Derek Jones Jr. and Chris Dunn would, who've played, across teams in the NBA and had a bit more of that all-round NBA experience, but can speak to guys like Keaton Wagler and tell them about the Clippers culture, maybe in like a less sort of locker room leadership way, more just like, you walking along the corridors together and kind of like, getting people clued up on things. So love those two moves from the Clippers. I love Clippers like rewarding guys who work really hard, because one of the things I love about the Clippers is they do feel like the hard work team of LA. Like the Lakers just always felt like they tried to, or they had to buy sort of things to go alongside Kobe to make Kobe's pretty much unsustainable game work without getting all controversial on this podcast. They just always felt like the Hollywood team of LA for me, and the Clippers always felt like, the real working class of LA. So them rewarding guys who've worked to be on NBA rosters is absolutely, fine by me.
Yeah, and Kobe Sanders, I think it was just his efficiency last year.
Yeah.
Like you said, not many minutes, not many touches, but what he did with the ball and the opportunities he had has earned this a position in our rotation, I think. So yeah, really excited for him, and I'm kind of hopeful that Keaton Wagner might have that kind of like level of efficiency, but just on like a higher scale because he's just more. He's got more in his locker. He's got more skills. Ability to sort of score from all three areas and be a playmaker as well, and his size. So yeah, I'm really hoping he will be that, and I think he profiles as like an incredibly efficient player. So yeah, I mean, Kobe's shown there is a pathway for that, and obviously I'm hoping Keaton Wagner will get more minutes and opportunity than Kobe did last year. So really exciting times for the Clippers, and I think actually an awesome segue into summer league, Josh. Which yeah, you must be absolutely excited and gassed that you're going to be out there come the end of this week. The summer league roster has dropped, and Keaton Wagner is on the roster. How many games he'll play, not sure, but I think we'll definitely see him. And Kobe Sanders, who we've just spoken about, also on the roster again. I would be shocked if he played all the games, but maybe a few cameos here and there would be cool. Cam Christie as well, who I've mentioned on the pod so far. I think this is a big summer league for him actually, and I
Yeah.
think maybe an opportunity for him to prove that he deserves a position on the roster, because it might be that they just let him walk, which would be interesting. And then some of the new guys who I don't think we've mentioned too much about, but Baba Miller, who was the sort of the first second round pick that the Clippers made in this draft. Nick Martinelli as well, who was sort of a later second round pick, is also on the roster. Josh, how excited are you to be heading out to Las Vegas this weekend, and what are you expecting from Summer League in this group?
Yeah, really excited. It's kind of like the funny thing about, I guess, leaning more into like overall NBA journalism and coverage and stuff. Is it like I'll kind of it's like being drafted. Like I've got maybe a couple of other NBA teams hats on here, but if you pull that hat off of whoever I'm talking about at the time, like there's always a Clippers hat underneath there. So the thing I'm now most excited about is like the idea of going there, looking at a few of those guys that you've mentioned there and what they can do on a summer league roster for the Clippers. Of course, we've got no Jordan Miller this year. It feels like he's kind of graduated from this, which I'm a little bit sad about. I'm sad that like there's not like a Xavier Moon on there or someone as well. So there's more of these names that we've seen be great for the Clippers in summer league in the past. But it just opens up the potential for someone else to hopefully come through and really rise to the ranks. And as you say, like we'd kind of mentioned it in passing on a couple of previous episodes, like I don't know how much the new prospects, especially at the top of the draft, will see like big minutes in this summer league. So same as you, like I don't know how much of Keaton Wagler we'll see. I hope we see more of Kobe Sanders, just because, as we mentioned, like that minute sample size was not really great last season, which is not a slight on the player. It's more of a slight on like the rotation wasn't necessarily catered to being able to reward guys like Kobe Sanders. It was just that he had to do a lot with a little, really. So I'd like to see him be given a lot, even if it's just in summer league, to just like show us what he can do. Because to me, like Kobe Sanders against guys who are, more his age and more his build and all these different kinds of things, like that sounds to me like he can, make that into fried chicken basically. So I'll be really excited to watch him play. Baba Miller, excited to see him play. Like, sounds very explosive. I can't remember what university it was that he came out of, but like there's a guy who I think he must subscribe to the Amphi Rap, which is probably why he follows me on Twitter, but he like tweeted me being like, this is a great kid, like you're going to enjoy him. Someone who obviously
Okay,
like went
cool.
to the same university as Baba Miller. So
Nice.
that was like a really nice little sort of, yeah, like almost anecdote for him, which has made me feel more excited for like watching him play. Because as I say, I like the Clippers having good personalities around the place. And then yeah, Nick Martinelli, like kind of almost in a way the forgotten man of the Clippers draft, really, because he comes as the latest pick in it. I mean, maybe besides Narcisse Ngoy, but we'll come back to college draft and stuff things at a later date, maybe, because I can't even
Yeah,
wrap my head around that for now. But Nick Martinelli just signed his two-way today. I've seen he's been doing a bit of the media availability for Summer League today too. So excited to see
nice.
what he can offer up. So yeah, as I say, I'll be going out there with a general NBA look and probably producing more like general NBA content. But in whatever chances I get, like best believe I'll be at Clippers games and I'll be texting you,
Nice.
James, and reporting back on these things and hopefully bringing back some knowledge for us to talk about on the next podcast. Hopefully when the Clippers
Yeah,
have won Summer League, that'll be quite nice. I think
cool.
we got close last season, lost to the Jazz, didn't we?
We
So
did, we did.
yeah, so maybe this is the year. This is our year.
Yeah, I've always enjoyed watching Summer League, tuning in, seeing some of the younger guys, but obviously this is going to be one where it's almost mandatory. I think unfortunately, given I'm not going to Summer League, obviously though one day would love the opportunity. I don't know if I'll be able to watch any of the games live because they're all extremely late times. So yeah, unless we progress and they put some friendly tips on for us UK fans, I'll be catching up. But for sure, I'm going to be watching every single game in the morning to see how some of the new faces are getting on, particularly Keaton Wagner. And like I said, be interested to see how many games he plays, and really want to just see how he meshes with some of the younger guys on the team. And yeah, what a fantastic opportunity, Josh. Obviously, we'll catch up once you get back. We'll get the rundown from Summer League, all the intel that you've gathered. We're sending you on a bit of a scouting trip for our new guys and who are the ones that are gonna really shine for the Clippers next year. And hopefully you can bring back some really cool information. And definitely check out Josh's content because he's obviously going to be live and on the ground over there. And it starts in just 3 days' time. So really, really exciting times. Any final thoughts, Josh, before we wrap this one up?
No, just exciting times for the Clippers, really, isn't it? Like, excited to see what this roster can do going into next season. Excited to see whether there are any more moves over the next couple of days now. I suspect, and I said this to you before we started recording, I'm happy to, put this on record, really. I expect that if this is the reporting around the Peyton Watson deal now, in terms of a sign and trade, in terms of possibly being included into that John Collins sign and trade as like a three-teamer there, I expect that there's probably a lot of preliminary stuff already done in that. So I'm
Yeah.
kind of almost leaning towards the point of expecting Peyton Watson to be a Clipper, which to me, as a guy who like watched a lot of Denver when they had the injuries last season, and saw how much he stepped up in those times, like makes me so excited by that prospect. So yeah, loads of exciting things to come. And as you say, James, starts with Summer League for me on the ground personally, but of course for anybody who will be lucky enough to be able to tune in and watch this young Clippers team have a go at maybe the ultimate prize of NBA Summer League.
Absolutely, mate. Absolutely. I'm really excited. I'm really excited to see what this young group can do. And yeah, I completely agree. I think Peyton Watson ends up a Clipper as well. And if he doesn't, or if he does, I think there's many moves that this front office are yet to make and trying to round out this roster. So exciting times. It's great to chop up some Clippers talk with you again. Obviously, big news that has obviously just happened that we've got to cover. So yeah, thanks again, Josh, and thanks all for listening, watching, wherever you're consuming this, and go Clips go.